welcome back to In the Dugout. I am Chris, and this is the Dugout Debate. I'm joined once again by Alex and Josh. Some of you may see us as the three amigos, but sometimes we're more like the three stooges. So how you doing, lads? How you doing, lads?
I think I'm probably curly today, actually, but I'm actually rather ecstatic after Sunday's result.
I'm rather depressed after Liverpool's sort result on Monday, but I'm sure you guys will have plenty of opportunities to remind me about that.
We have done for the last 4 weeks, so why would it change now?
Liverpool are the gift that keeps on giving.
Apart from for the
Not
Liverpool fans.
All right, we're not actually going to start with Liverpool this week. We're actually going to start in Europe. So let's take a look at...
Can I just say, I think Liverpool is probably in Europe. But...
Yeah, I mean in a European...
Quick geography lesson there, but okay,
I mean
we'll
a European competition, Josh.
All right.
Don't get pedantic, please. So we start off with our round called Picture This. So here we see a fairly disheartened-looking Spurs side. So, lads, quite simply, picture this.
I think I might start off this week, just to give you guys a bit of a break. Is it Harry Kane showing off to his Spurs teammates what his mentor Luis Suarez has taught him?
See, I went along a similar vein. I thought it might be Harry Kane trying to do his very best Robbie Fowler impression.
Is it just quite simply the good, the bad, the ugly? I'll leave the order of that up to you, but...
Or is it possibly where you and your mates go to the club and one of them gets turned away for being too drunk and then all three of you have to go and take him home? Always a bit awkward, that.
Feels. Does anyone have the actual odds?
No, I don't actually. No.
For God's sake.
Yeah, alright. It is, of course, Spurs crashing out of the Europa League last week.
That's right. It's Spurs being knocked out of Europe on a 3-2 aggregate scoreline to Belgian side Ghent. It's obviously not the first time that Spurs have been knocked out of a European competition. So my question to you guys is quite simply, why are Spurs so terrible in Europe?
I think it's a lack of experience.
Yeah, I was going to say exactly the same thing.
I don't, apart from maybe Hugo Lloris, I don't think there's many, or if any, Spurs players that have had the experience of a top Champions League side. And I would consider Tottenham a top Premier League side. And the top Premier League sides tend to be considered top Champions League sides, or Leicester aside maybe. So there's no reason why a Premier League side shouldn't be performing in the Champions League. But it has to be experience. There's no other answer for it, because Tottenham are absolutely flying in the Premier League. They've got world-class players, a world-class squad. Their chemistry is ridiculous. They've got a great manager. So the only factor that perhaps they don't have that other teams that they're facing do have, whether it's Belgian side Ghent, or whether it's teams in the Champions League that they've been playing against, the only factor that differentiates those teams from Spurs is the experience in Europe. And I think that has to be the only, if not the main, reason for them not doing so well in Europe.
Would you have to agree with that, Alex?
Yeah, I think so. I think that, obviously we don't know because we're not at the end of the season yet, but Spurs haven't showed so far any real signs of choking in the Premier League so far, as we can argue that they potentially did last season, obviously finishing third when they were really challenging for the title. And I think what we might see this season is they're not so much challenging for the title, but they're really challenging to stay in that second spot. And I think what we might see is hopefully a more diligent, more composed finish to the season. And I think that the reason they choked last season in the Premier League was because they weren't used to being in that position in the Premier League. And I think, like Josh said, you can put that down to the exact same thing in the Champions League and the Europa League. They haven't ever been on a big Champions League run or a big Europa League run. And I think experience shows that it's so important. I think Man City had a brilliant squad for the last few seasons, and for so long, obviously last season they did very well, but have struggled in the Champions League. So I think, especially when you're playing against Europe's elite, experience is such a colossal thing to have on your side. You need to know how to handle those big games, and I just don't think Tottenham know how to do it just yet.
Yeah, I'd also have to cite the fact that they're not actually playing at home that could also be playing into that. I mean, they've been playing their Champions League and Europa League games at Wembley.
But in previous seasons, they've been playing at home, and they've still been struggling, so...
It swings and roundabouts.
Yeah.
But one team who comfortably managed to pass through the Europa League was Man United. They quite simply dispatched Saint Etienne with relative ease, I'd say. And now they've got perhaps one of the easiest draws that they could have got in the Europa League. They face FC Rostov of Russia at the Olymp 2 Stadium next Thursday. So, Josh, being a Man United fan...
Am I?
Being a Man United fan, do you feel that United actually have a really good chance of winning the Europa League when you look at the other teams still in the competition? Are there any match the calibre of Man United?
No, not at all. But given how this Premier League season's gone, certainly the first part of the season, a good team on paper doesn't equate to a good team in theory, or in practice rather. If you look at previous seasons where we've had, I would argue, pretty decent teams, having crashed out of the Champions League, ending up in the Europa League, and we still lost to, I would argue, completely mediocre teams compared to the squad that United have had and have got.
Like Liverpool.
Well, yeah. No, honestly, I think that Liverpool's team is inferior to Manchester United's, and it was last season too. However, I think that Jose Mourinho has got United playing so well at the moment. We're on absolute fire, and you'd be stumped to find any team that's going to get into their path. Maybe Chelsea in the FA Cup, but perhaps. But certainly, I don't think Rostov should be causing us any problems, and any teams in the competition for that matter. Maybe I think Ajax, from the top of my head, they're the team that's probably going to be causing the biggest threat to United's campaign in the Europa League. But yeah, I think United are clear favourites, and if they don't win, it'll be pretty shocking if whoever they lose to.
Well, do you vouch for that, Alex? Could Rostov do... Well, Rostov last season were essentially Russia's Leicester. They were top of the table for a long time and then were pipped to the post at the final stage and ended up finishing second.
Yeah.
They had a fairly decent time in the Champions League. They were able to beat the likes of Bayern Munich, for example, and to finish third in a group with Bayern Munich, Atletico Madrid, and I can't quite remember who else. That does speak some fairly considerable volumes. So
no, I think it does. I think that United would be fools to go into this game thinking Rostov are a bunch of mugs. We can play out our second team and still win. If I was Jose Mourinho right now, and Josh may completely disagree with me on this, the race for the top four is so open at the moment. I think there are a couple of teams that are really, to use a word you two love so much, slipping away. I think that if anything was shown by Monday night, when it push comes to shove, as much as I say, I don't think Liverpool have the bottle to get top four. But I think it's still a very tough race. I think that looking at teams still in that league, in the Europa League, United have to look at that as a really realistic way of getting Champions League football. I think they shouldn't look at Rostov as easy opponents. I think Rostov will give them a game. But, I mean, over the course of 2 legs, with the calibre of player United have got, I don't think there's any team in Europe that wants to deal with Zlatan Ibrahimovic at the moment. I don't think there's a team in Europe who ever wants to go 2 legs against Jose Mourinho because he's so experienced, he knows how to get a result. And, I mean, I just can't see past a United result here.
yeah, I'd have to agree with you. I would have money down on United to win the whole tournament as well.
Yeah.
And speaking of tournaments, United have already managed to win one this season. They won the League Cup.
Too damn right we have.
Beating Southampton 3-2 in the final at Wembley. This is now United's 5th League Cup, and they are now the most successful club in the country.
Sorry, Alex. Hey!
So with that, Alex, I will turn to you.
Brilliant.
Do you feel that, well, there was a lot of questionable decision that is very much the elephant in the room. So do you feel that United got a fair result?
Honestly, no, I really don't. And I'm not saying this, it might sound like I'm very much saying this because I'm a Liverpool fan. I'm salty whenever Man United win anything, which, in fairness, I am. But you guys will remember, we have a little group chat, and I was sending some very emotional messages over how incensed I was that Manolo Gabbiadini's first goal didn't go in. And you have to believe that had that first goal gone in, it would have been a different game. And I think that, on one hand, you could argue that Southampton would have just really pressed on and gone on to win it, potentially. But one thing you have to take into account, as much as United might have taken that as motivation, is that they probably wouldn't have gone up the other end 3-4 minutes later and put in a free kick through Zlatan Ibrahimovic. I think that Southampton played absolutely out of their skin. I think that they were very unlucky to have that goal ruled offside. Arguably, you could say Jesse Lingard should have been sent off, but I think that would have been as controversial had he been sent off as when he was kept on the pitch. And at the end of the day, as much as I felt like Southampton really deserved a result from that match, I think that when you have a player like Zlatan Ibrahimovic in your team who is able to produce those moments of magic as he did, you're always going to give yourself a chance. And at the end of the day, we can bemoan the lack of good refereeing. But I mean, until you're prepared to put video refereeing, you can't moan about referees doing anything. He was in a tough position. It was a very tough call. And there are a lot of players around, so you can't criticise the linesman. And at the end of the day, I don't think you can bemoan United too much based on their performance, because they weren't bad by any means in the game.
No, not at all. I'm sorry I'm not going to be asking you about United, Josh. I'm going to be asking you about your opposition, and that was Southampton. We've already touched upon the goal being disallowed, which I personally felt was an incredibly harsh decision.
Yeah.
So do you feel like Southampton should have deserved extra time?
Honestly, I think they probably deserved to win the whole match based on their performance and United's performance. But to touch on what Alex was saying about if Gabbiadini's goal, the first one, had actually counted, that Southampton could very well have gone on to win the game. Potentially, but by the same token, Southampton brought it back to 2-2. They were sort of the in-form team during that last period of the game. United still went on to score the winner. So I would argue that United actually got the winning goal in the part of the game where they weren't actually on top. So it's actually a really, really hard one to call. And obviously, in hindsight, with all the different camera angles and the different stats and should this happen, could this have happened, it's very, very easy to say, yeah, Southampton could have won the game based on Gabbiadini's if that had gone in. But I think if you look at the golfing class between Southampton and Manchester United, no, Southampton might have performed better on the day, but United have got match winners, and I think that's the difference between the two sides.
100%. And equally, just as a separate point, and this is something I never ever understand, and it's just the fact that some players perform on big occasions. Zlatan Ibrahimovic is one of them, but he's class on small occasions as well. Personally, I think Jesse Lingard is a completely average footballer, but you cannot bemoan the fact that the guy turns up in finals. Hasn't he scored like 3 goals?
Yeah, in the FA Cup final,
in
he got the
three-
winner,
he scored-
the Community
yeah.
Shield, and
Community Shield
the League
and
Cup
he scored a
final.
goal on this. So I think, and obviously Gabbiadini massively turned up for Southampton. But when you've got players in your squad that, even if they're average players that you don't expect to, I think, will turn up on the big occasion. And I think it's something we touched upon possibly last week. I'm not sure if we did, but United having that experience in the dressing room, the likes of Ibrahimovic who have been through it all, keeping everybody calm, keeping everyone grounded, so the occasion didn't get to them. I think that those kind of things are really the key things that turn those kind of games. And Southampton can have a goal disallowed. Yes, they could be on top all they want, but when you've got the players who have the head to be able to, in the 86th minute, find that area of space in the box and put it in, you can't bemoan a victory for United, as much as it pains me to say it. And as much as I think Southampton deserved to get something out of the game, it's not a game that you can say United absolutely did not deserve to win, because that would be wrong.
One thing I want to add is also United playing not as well as Southampton, but still going on to win the tournament, is not only a hallmark of a champion, but it's also very typical of a Jose Mourinho side. So I don't think we can be too surprised, because that's United's bread and butter under the Fergies, was not playing well, grinding out results, coming from behind or losing silly goals and still winning the game. So we talk about the United of old, but this really is what we were seeing in the Fergie years. So it became to the point where it wasn't a fluke, it wasn't accidental, it was just a good team. That was just how they would win the match, and I think that's just what we continue to see under Jose, and I think it's really great to see.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. It's nice to see United back where they belong, I'd say. So just to round off talking about the League Cup, we're going to actually focus on the league now. How does this result affect the two teams in the league? Can United continue to snowball? And can Southampton now focus more on the league? And I highlighted Gabbiadini being a pretty good signing as soon as he joined Southampton, and it's my decision is starting to look like it's really true. Mm-hmm. So do you feel he was only £14.5 million, which if he keeps scoring like this, that's going to be an absolute bargain. So I'll reiterate to the both of you, can United now just keep the momentum going? And can Southampton now focus more on their league place?
I think a top 4 for United is predictable. I think it's going to happen, to be honest with you. I think if any teams are going to drop out, it's probably going to be Arsenal, and obviously Liverpool aren't going to get in there in the first place. In terms of Southampton, I think that Gabardini is a great signing. The only problem is I don't know how much longer he's going to be there, because Southampton are a selling club, and the thing is with them, they've almost become immune to managerial changes and to big names leaving. So that's almost their Premier League philosophy since returning from the Championship. So I think they really have to get the best out of Gabardini while they can, because the bigger teams know that they're a selling club. Southampton know that they're a selling club. They'll get good money for him, but how much longer he's going to be there is a mystery. So they can't be relying on him too heavily. I would argue.
I would totally echo what Josh said about most of that. I think United, I don't think this makes too much difference to them. I think they were on a massive run of form anyway. The confidence is so high in that team, and I think that they were going to push really seriously for top four, regardless of that result. And I think that result will only spur them on to continue to do so. It won't faze them. Southampton should take a lot of heart from that performance. I think that they will feel very unlucky to lose. And they will feel that they could and possibly should have a trophy in their cabinet right now. But they'll take heart from the way they performed against what is a very strong and very informed Manchester United side. And as for Gabbiadini, I think that I said he was going to be completely bang average, and I thought he was going to flop. I was wrong, and I hold my hands up and I say that. At the moment, it's looking like I'm going to be wrong. He's not going to leave in the summer. He's signed in January. They're at least going to have him for the next season.
Oh, of course, yeah.
And I think that if they can obviously it's a final, they're pulling out the stops even more so than usual. But I mean, with a striker of that quality, he's a poacher. He has that positional awareness, and his positional awareness, by the way, is absolutely astounding. Watching that game, just being able to find that area of space and get that shot off. I think that having a striker like that, because Shane Long's good, he's not great, and I think that Gabbiadini could get them 15 goals next season. They could possibly push for Europa League football next season, 100%. I think I would back them to definitely put in a serious shift for that. And if they do so, maybe they can keep the likes of Manolo Gabbiadini and whatever other players are playing very well in their squad. So it'll be really interesting to see, but I think Southampton, they won't be knocked by that performance because it was such a good performance.
I just say I think the Europa League is probably a stretch for Southampton, given that they'd have to. I think it'd have to be a top four side winning the FA Cup. So I don't know.
Oh no, not this season. They won't get Europa League this season.
Oh right, okay, yeah. Cause I'm saying because there's obviously a lot of teams
No,
above.
there are plenty of teams who are going to get Europa League above Southampton this season in particular.
Okay.
I feel like that that rounds off the League Cup. And now we move on to our phrase of the week, which this week is gut-wrenchingly sad. So, lads, what could this mean?
I'll take this one first. Is it the words used by Adam Lallana to describe how he feels about the fact he has to live in Liverpool for another 5 years?
Is it how would I describe Chris's love life?
You cut me deep.
Actually, the answer is yes. That's how I would describe it.
Is it the phrase used to describe how many fans of a certain football team in the Premier League felt when they found out that Hodgson could be their new manager for the rest of the season?
Rewind 7 years ago, that was Liverpool.
Which is why I know how it feels.
Is it how did Wayne Shaw feel after finishing his pie?
But I bet he felt great at the time, and it was a pasty. It was a pasty.
Why is it called Piegate then?
It should be called Pastygate. I don't know the specifics of this, but this is something to do with Claudio Ranieri being sacked, isn't it?
Is how Gary Lineker described it on social media.
It's how he described it. Gary Lineker, yeah.
It's how Gary Lineker described the sacking of Claudio Ranieri over Twitter.
Chris is using his hands to get the precision of accuracy of the quote.
I'm going full Donald Trump with the hand.
They call him the Donald Trump of the football world.
And before you say it, Josh, we're not calling him Donald J. Trump or President Trump. We didn't do this for Obama. We didn't call him Barack H. Obama.
That's because we only started this program in January. You complete moron.
Former President Obama. Let's talk about Claudio Ranieri,
Let's talk about Claudio Ranieri, someone else who has left an office recently. So...
Nice segue, right that.
Yes. The question, quite simply, is, why sack him after all he's done for Leicester City Football Club? Where has the loyalty gone? especially after the club itself tweeted a few days earlier, I think it was 2 weeks earlier, that he had the full support of the club, and then they just turn around and sack him. What is going on with this whole player revolt talk as well?
It makes absolutely no sense. Go on, do you want to start?
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say, I'm normally very prepared to, at any given point, just play devil's advocate for the sake of playing devil's advocate. But at this point, I can't. I think it's such a disgusting decision.
Yeah.
Like, the football that I don't like, to an extent, obviously in more recent years, it's becoming less and less so. But the football that at the very beginning we all grew up with is football where it was about the game. It was about the game, and it was about, to some extent, sentimentality. And that football that we knew as we grew up is clearly gone. This is such simple that it's clearly gone. 4 players, I don't care whether they deny it, I don't believe them. 4 players, I think it's Mark Albrighton, Wes Morgan, Kasper Schmeichel and Jamie Vardy apparently went to the board and said to the board, no word of a lie, that went behind the manager's back and said, you should sack the man who has achieved more with this club than any other manager will achieve. You should sack the man who is going to help us as players achieve something way more than we should have been capable of, because he helped us believe that we could do it. He gave us confidence in the tactics to be able to do so. I think the decision is absolutely disgusting.
Oh,
I don't
agree.
And there was a tweet, and I think it was actually by Spencer Owen, where he said, normally if a manager loses the confidence of the dressing room, sack the manager. In this case, I'm completely with Spencer Owen when he says, if the manager loses the confidence of some players in the dressing room, sack the players.
Yeah.
I don't care who they are. I don't care if it's Jamie Vardy, who had a great season last season. He's been toilet dug this season. He's been rubbish this season. I don't care what players lost faith in him. Claudio Ranieri should have had at least 3 years in that job after what he did for that club. I have no idea what the board was thinking. It says a lot about the board that 4 players are able to go up to them and say, oi mate, sack the manager. And they just go, yeah, no bother mate, we will do. Like, that's disgusting. It's absolutely no confidence in the manager. The board has absolutely no power. All powers with the players. And there's been so many cases where that has been absolutely problematic. I'm ranting, so I'm going to stop, and I'll leave it to one of you to say something, because otherwise I could just go on for ages.
I don't think I've ever agreed with you more in my life. It's an absolutely abhorrent decision. It's just grotesque. It's just disgusting. It's completely ridiculous. But what troubles me, there's 2 things that trouble me. Firstly, if you take last season out of it, Leicester are exactly as you were in terms of, fighting relegation, and now they're fighting relegation again. So quite what the Leicester board are expecting is slightly beyond me. And secondly, I forgot my point was that. Oh yeah, I think that if Ranieri hadn't won the league, he'd still be in a job at the moment, personally. So I think it's sad. Yeah. I think it's sad that actually winning the league has been conducive to him losing his job.
He's a victim of his own success. He took a team. It's not like before that team was underperforming. He took a team that was a relegation battling team, and it wasn't all down to him, don't get me wrong, the players were playing out their skin as well. But under his management, they challenged for the league, and they weren't a team that was they had a lot of talent, and all of a sudden, this suddenly flourished out of them. Yes, N'Golo Kante has shown that he's a world-class player, and Riyad Mahrez has shown that he has that talent. Obviously, he hasn't so much this season. But, I mean, they should be erecting a statue of Ranieri outside the King Power Stadium, and instead he's leaving it
after him.
100%. It's absolutely disgusting. They're still in with a very good shout of getting through to the Champions League quarterfinals, which is beyond what that Leicester team should even be thinking they should be capable of. And I completely agree with Josh. Had he not won the Premier League and he just kept Leicester up consistently, that would have been a really successful job. But he did just keep them up. He didn't just make them mid-table. If they'd been challenging for Europe, they would have been in dreamland. And Leicester, and he probably still would have won World Manager of the Year. But he won them the league, Premier League.
It's the greatest story in football history, without a shadow of a doubt. That a team as small and as I'm going to say sort of insignificant as Leicester going on to achieve the greatest league prize in the world, it's just phenomenal. And for him to be sacked on the back of that, they might be fighting relegation, but what the bloody hell were they expecting? Oh, all the other
less time than Van Gaal.
Yeah,
less time than Van Gaal.
All the other teams, as to be expected, we're gonna start improving and trying to catch Leicester out. That's to be expected. So I don't know quite what the Leicester board were thinking of. And if you go to the other end of the spectrum with Arsenal, where Wenger should have gone years ago, without question, I think you can. I think this is definitely an argument you can see both sides to, simply because we've
this
got an
is
example of how badly longevity can go wrong. But then,
Yeah, this is the 5th season in a row where the manager who won the league last season has now left the club the following.
Oh, but this is a completely different.
well,
I know-
Ferguson retired.
Ferguson retired.
Pellegrini was sort of he was sacked, but in
He was
favour.
replaced.
To be fair,
He was-
as much as I didn't agree with getting rid of him, they did replace him with Guardiola, who's got a decent track record.
Then you
Who
still
should have
still have Mancini, Mourinho, and now Ranieri, who were all sacked a season after.
Yeah, but I think
But there's such a
Mourinho, I would argue,
Mourinho,
I think Mourinho deserved to lose his job because he really acted badly with the physio, and he completely lost the play.
the whole
You could
Cardell
see that.
thing.
And who was the one? Mancini. Mancini. I think he was questionable as well. I think that he I wouldn't have sacked him personally, but I think that the way his handling of Balotelli and of Carlos Tevez was absolutely shocking. He completely went back on his word, and I think that he completely lost any conviction amongst football fans, pundits, and owners. So I think out of those 5, Ranieri, without a shadow of a doubt, was the least deserving to have been, or probably apart from Ferguson, to have lost his job.
With Mancini though, Mancini had how long was he in a job? Like 2 years?
He took over in 2010. Partway through 2009-10 season, I think. Then obviously Chelsea won that season. United won the season after, and then he won the 11-12 season, and then United.
So he's around for about 2 years, wasn't he?
2.5, 3 years, yeah.
Yeah. With that Manchester City team, the one that he had, even the one now, but that's a different story. The Manchester City team that he had at the time, with Vincent Kompany at his prime before he lost the ability to not injure his legs every time he stepped on a football field. That team should have been winning the league every single time. And they gave him the time of day. He did win them the league, but that wasn't their aspiration. Yes, true, but they shouldn't have even come down spectacular fashion. They should have been walking the league. And the aim was to do well in Europe, and he didn't. So he had his aim, and he failed it.
But it was an unrealistic aim, though.
Ranieri, yeah, granted, but he had his. But the thing is, what I'm saying is, it's different from Ranieri in that Ranieri's aim at no point when he was
absolutely.
at Leicester should have been anything other than keep us in the Premier League. And like you say, had he just kept them in the Premier League last season, kept it steady, kept Leicester being a safe club in the league, he would still have a job right now. But for some reason, the board have just gone into this state of, we won the league once, we must be a Champions League quality club. You look at that team. You have your centre-backs are Hughes and Morgan.
The thing is, though, but last season we weren't saying this, though. We were saying that Wes Morgan was one of the best centre-backs in the entire league.
No, that's not true. We were saying that Wes Morgan and Robert Huth were playing absolutely out of their skin, even last season. At no point, and well, I'm sure some people did, but at no point was I personally under any illusions that either one of Wes Morgan or Robert Huth were top quality world class.
But as a partnership, they work. Though you don't have to have top quality players individually to play well as a team. Leicester displayed that for the entirety of last season.
No, but they've been found out. That's the point. What I'm saying is that as a unit last year, that Leicester team played absolutely brilliantly. Don't get me wrong, but nobody should have been under any illusions that, regardless of like the fact that they might have made a good partnership, at some point a partnership that's as immobile, that's as slow, that's as old as Robert Huth and Wes Morgan were going to get found out. They were going to get. It was inevitable. It was going to happen eventually.
100%.
Counter Leicester, just the same way that they had set themselves out to counter the other teams last season.
Yeah, Ranieri's issue was that other teams were getting wise to Leicester's tactics, but he wasn't altering his own tactics. He wasn't sort of countering the counter. A bit like we were talking about with Klopp and Conte, their sort of mind games a few weeks ago. Yeah. He wasn't altering his tactics. He was being very, very stubborn in the way he set out his team. And for that reason, that's why Leicester are finding themselves losing game after game, conceding goal after goal. But I also don't know if... Admittedly, he shouldn't have lost his job, but he also did make some questionable signings, I would argue.
Oh yeah,
Leicester went the complete opposite of what they'd done seasons before, like doing proper good scouting, finding players who were incredibly cheap for the quality that they'd showed with Leicester in that incredible season. And now they've gone the complete other end of the spectrum, especially in January, signing players. Well, not just January. In January, signing Wilfred Ndidi. In the summer, signing Islam Slimani
and Musa
and Ahmed Musa.
Dumping 30 million on Islam Slimani was a joke.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry. They got 30 million for Kante and bought Islam Slimani, a guy who had one good season in the Portuguese league. Now, he wasn't even proven in the Portuguese league. That was the first time he'd really proven any quality in that league, and they signed him off for one season for 30 mil. That was a terrible signing. I don't think Ranieri's faultless. Don't get me wrong. I think that I think that he needed a review. I think the board did need to review him, but
Arsenal ended up getting Leicester's chief scout from at the start of this season. So I think
I just want to add one last thing though. I think the biggest insult of all is who he's rumoured to be replaced by. Either Craig Shakespeare, Roy Hodgson, or Roberto Mancini. Right, let's start with the latter. Roberto Mancini has absolutely no experience whatsoever in a relegation battle, let alone in the bloody Premier League. Second of all, Roy Hodgson, who was, if we're going to talk about a team that should be challenging for, say, top half, when he took over Liverpool, that's where they were. That's where he left them. So that's completely a disaster. He completely flopped with the England side. The only team that he did half decent at was West Brom and Fulham to a certain extent. And Craig Shakespeare, for God's sake, I might as well manage the bloody team if that's the case. It's just a complete liability. It's a complete joke. It's a complete shambles. It's just embarrassing.
What's happened to us Hiddink? I heard that he was going to be...
I also heard
he'd be even more of a questionable... I just don't understand.
No, there is literally no...
I just do not understand.
That is a worse decision than Roy Hodgson.
I honestly would bring back...
one of the single
Nigel
worst
Pearson.
managers. Genuinely, he's absolutely terrible. I'm struggling to find the words without saying some of the most offensive things that are coming to my head. But what he did to that England squad was a disgrace. Leicester City, last season... What did they win the Premier League on? They won it on motivation and they won it on belief. Does Roy Hodgson provide any of those
Roy
things?
Roy Hodgson's tactics are dated back in the prehistoric era. It's just crazy. So I think they're Thai, the owners of Leicester.
Yes,
they have no knowledge of football whatsoever. They clearly don't. Because if they did, they would not be sacking Ranieri and putting these complete jokes into
Not
the
only
hot
that,
seat.
they wouldn't be sacking him after a game in the Champions League where you admittedly lost 2-1 away, but you've got an away
Exactly.
goal.
If they win 1-0,
That's
they're
a really good
through.
result. It's disgusting.
So as you
think
can see, we're completely indifferent to the sacking.
So to conclude, I think it was a good.
Yeah. I was so angry and frustrated. To quote Wayne Rooney when there's rumours of him leaving, well, I'm angry and confused. And I won't quote him often, but it's just crazy. Words don't do any of our emotions justice. It's just the whole world of football. I've yet to see one person on social media, celebrity, pundit, fan or otherwise, who accepts his decision. I mean, Jose Mourinho, maybe people think it was a bit over the top, coming out into the press conference with Ranieri's initials on his polo shirt was an absolute touch of genius. It's just class, and that just echoes the sentiments of the entire footballing world. And it's just crazy. It really is. It's just awful.
I think we've spoken about this enough, but just to round up, I feel like Roy Hodgson may have seen the odds on him to become Leicester manager, and now he's doing as he would say, a Wayne Shaw.
Why not put Remy Gard in? It's about illogical to signing his bloody...
If they go anywhere near Paul Tisdale, if they still pull Tisdale away from my beloved Exeter, I will be very upset.
Oh, I heard that Martin Allen's free, the bloody snake, after leaving Barnet. And then getting sacked. I'm using bloody a lot because I'm just so angry. That's my go-to word when I'm angry. Is bloody.
Angry react only.
Yeah.
I feel like we need to stop talking about rap before any more of us blow our lids. So we're going to finish off with our weekly feature, which is the actual dugout debate. And this week, I propose that we talk about, in light of Ranieri being sacked, which apparently we still can't fucking escape from, we're going to be talking about the most questionable managerial sackings of the Premier League era. So any manager across the entire Premier League season, since it was renamed in 1992, who was sacked for almost no understandable reason.
Not counting Claudio Ranieri, because that would have been a very unfair one.
Soon, that beautiful Italian man is It's just too sad to talk about right now, even though we spent about 10 minutes just talking about it
I need a
now.
pizza.
But we're all emotionally scarred.
We all feel for Leicester, but
No, I don't feel for...
No, we don't.
The only person
No,
I
we
feel
don't.
for is Ranieri. I would
feel
love
for
nothing
Ranieri.
I hope
more
Leicester get
than Leicester to get
relegated.
relegated.
I want Leicester to go there. So my choice for most questionable managerial sacking is Michael Laudrup being sacked by Swansea City.
My fruit.
Is this where we... Do we say...
Yeah.
I thought you were going to make a case. Mine is incidentally one that I'm kind of surprised that Chris didn't take, but I suppose it's a bit controversial, this decision. Is the sacking of Tactics Tim, aka Tim Sherwood, by Aston Villa at the end of... Was it the end of last season?
It was
Mid of last season.
Midway through last season, yeah. That one.
Right, I'm going for a Pepe Mel from West Brom. The hero that is. No, I'm going for Jose Mourinho from his first spell at Chelsea. Without
Josh,
question.
it's that kind of chat that got you banned from the Hawthorns.
We don't talk about that, Avery.
How are we supposed to do our stadium tour of the country with you banned from...
You can't even get any time off work.
That's a fair point. Okay, so...
Anyway.
Alex, would you like to start off with the absolute footballing hero that is Tactics Tim?
I mean, to quote Josh Samuels, not really, but I mean, I'll do it anyway.
I've copyrighted that.
So my reasoning behind Tactics Tim, I'm not confident about winning this, mate. I know that's always a really good way to start it off, but I mean, I'm not. I think you guys have got some really solid shouts. But my issue with the sacking of Tim Sherwood was the fact that he got sacked after what was an extremely impressive FA Cup run for a start. And I mean, when you're Aston Villa in that situation, at that point, Aston Villa were a relegation club. They were fighting relegation, and the best they could hope for was stay up in the Premier League and have a decent cup run. And by decent cup run, I basically mean quarterfinals. That is a decent cup run for a club. That, no offence, Chris, none of this is said just to take the piss, but that was a poor club.
Oh,
I mean,
no,
yes, Christian Benteke.
We were a dying club.
Yeah, but at the point, you had Christian Benteke and Fabian Delph, who at the time, more questionable now, but at the time, were two genuinely Premier League proven, decent quality players. And he managed to get the best out of them. He managed to beat Liverpool in the semi-final of the FA Cup. And we weren't great at the time, but we were still a very decent side. Beat us and got to the final. And yes, you got smashed by Arsenal. That granted. But I mean, what do you expect? You got through to the final of the FA Cup, and that's really genuinely impressive. And I think that you could argue that perhaps he made some mistakes in terms of letting Christian Benteke go and Fabian Delph go, who were, as I said, really the only two quality players in that squad. But he did replace them with what should have been genuine Premier League proven quality in Micah Richards and Julian Lescott. Obviously now we know that perhaps not so much.
I don't think they're like for like replacements though, are they?
No, they're not like for like replacements, but
whatsoever.
He made
defenders for a midfielder and a striker. Yeah, great.
no, granted,
That's why Lescott failed. He was in the wrong position.
Why did they play him up front? It was just a nightmare.
Because he's good at heading.
But what I'm saying is, for all the criticisms you can make of this transfer policy, he did. I don't think you can criticise it too much because he did make two signings that, had they been asked to play for Aston Villa, would have genuinely shored up that Villa side. And I think that, given the sort of club they were, and given what we've seen afterwards, having no one else who was going to take that Aston Villa job, and a man who had proven himself to be very decent in the role, I think that Tim Sherwood was genuinely the best man for Villa at the time. And I think that sacking him based on the season that he'd had and based on who was available at the time, especially like the situation around it, was a complete farce of a decision because there was nobody else who was going to take Villa anywhere other than where Tim Sherwood took them.
I do have some criticisms of that, but I'll get to that later. Josh, would you like?
Don't hold back.
Would you like to explain Jose Mourinho being sacked from his first season at Chelsea?
Not really.
Or his first spell at Chelsea?
Yeah.
Steal Alex's joke, which he stole from you. Stealingception, great.
Well, basically, I'm stealing my own joke, so it's just my joke. Anyway, look. In his first two seasons, he won 2 titles. He won a League Cup and I believe an FA Cup. He won the FA Cup in 2007. So that was his final full season at Stamford Bridge, where United won the league. He was given no time at all to readjust his squad significantly to the point that they could actually be genuinely challenging for the title once again. He was given essentially the equivalent of about 2 months, sort of the first half of August and the second half of August, first half of October, to sort things out at Stamford Bridge. Admittedly, he didn't. They lost to, I think it was Rosenborg in the Champions League, and that was the final nail in the coffin. But if you look at who they replaced him with, Avram Grant, and I just sit there face palming, thinking, why? You know, he got them to the Champions League final, and he took United all the way in the Premier League. But you know, you can say, okay, that makes him a good manager. But if you look at what he did afterwards with Portsmouth and West Ham, I don't think there was anyone else. Just okay. He got both of them relegated. So it becomes the point where the only reason that Jose Mourinho got sacked was because he fell out with Roman Abramovich. And that man is going to be the downfall of his own club, and he has been on several occasions. And Chelsea had a pretty decent squad. Jose Mourinho was performing with them season in, season out. And if you take the Ranieri example, when Ranieri won the league, that was beyond expectations. So then when when he's not sustaining that, suddenly you're thinking, well, why? Whereas with I know that Mourinho had the big budget and there was the financial expectation, but Chelsea they'd never won the Premier League before. They hadn't won the league in 50 years before they won it in 2005. So when finishing second is not that bad an achievement. So that didn't warrant the sacking whatsoever.
I feel like this is where I come in with Michael Laudrup from being sacked by Swansea. So what my reason behind picking Michael Laudrup was because of what he had to. Well, firstly because of what he had to follow up on. Brendan Rodgers' Swansea side had gained promotion. They finished third in the Championship, gained promotion by the playoffs, which is very good for Swansea. And then that season after, they finished mid-table in 11th, which for a team that's just come up is a very good
It's remarkable,
season.
yeah.
Of course, yeah.
So then Brendan Rodgers is sacked quite early on into the next season, and Laudrup comes in and replaces him. What Laudrup did with Swansea was he finished above where Brendan Rodgers had finished with them. Brendan Rodgers finished 11th, Laudrup finished in 9th, and he won the League Cup with Swansea. And that is Swansea's only major trophy.
Yeah.
That's an incredible achievement for a team who had only been promoted 2 seasons before. And you also have to look at the signings that he made for Swansea. He brought in the likes of Pablo Hernandez, Ki Sung-young, Michu, especially in his first season. Michu scored 22 goals in all competitions. That's an inspired signing. And yes, he tailed off afterwards. He was like a definitive Premier League season wonder.
Got out eventually. Good job.
But I did. But also, Swansea ended up qualifying for the Europa League.
Yeah.
And in that season as well, they ended up beating Arsenal 2-0 at the Emirates. Swansea had an absolutely incredible season. And then to sack Laudrup after that season, after a relatively poor run, it slightly echoes what's happened with Ranieri. Yes, they didn't achieve quite the same feat, but they did achieve quite a lot with winning the League Cup and finishing in 9th place, qualifying for the Europa League. That is, well, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but that's phenomenal for a team who'd only just come up 2 seasons earlier.
Okay, so I'll jump straight in then. The thing that I would say that distinguishes Laudrup sacking and Sherwood sacking is I think Laudrup was more of a shock, personally. And also with Sherwood's, they replaced him with a completely crazy choice, as we mentioned before with Remy Gard. Laudrup, as you were saying, he really did perform well. I can't really argue against the fact that he should have been sacked. He shouldn't have been sacked. But if you look at Gary Monk, he then took what Laudrup did and he built upon it. I would argue that Gary Monk's was the more questionable sacking than Laudrup's personally. Tim Sherwood, Villa were underperforming. Not like Swansea, I would argue, weren't underperforming under Laudrup. Sherwood, I wouldn't have sacked him personally, but I can see why they did. And I think it's more who they replaced him with that was the more questionable decision than the fact that they sacked Sherwood in the first place.
Well, just to add to that, you spoke about the signings that Sherwood brought in. A lot of the signings that Villa made that season weren't actually under Sherwood's authorization. A lot of the signings that were brought in were chosen by Randy Lerner and the scouting team, who had pretty much no scouting experience. Pretty much nobody in that Villa boardroom had any footballing experience. I've spoken in the past about how Villa acted in that season, not bringing in Premier League proven talent. I mean, they tried to with the likes of Micah Richards and Jolien Lescott, but they were both past it. Micah Richards, I'd say less so because he was one of the few players who actually looked like he cared. And I've spoken in the past.
Oh yeah, are we waiting to get on the right about the Midlands Strumpet?
The Midlands Strumpet.
The Midlands Strumpet. That was one of your most quality phrases
That's
ever.
that's
So
that's
good.
number 2 compared to the Musa Dembele award.
Musa Dembele. But
Do you know who else played for Aston Villa? Stilian Petrov, who was actually bumped out of Unsung Hero of the League for Unsung Hero
Yeah.
Musa Dembele.
You're
What do they
You're
keep him as
still
again?
what we
What do they
keep
keep
him
him as?
But no, Sherwood the reason why Sherwood is perhaps less questionable is that he didn't have any control of the players that he brought in. I mean, very few of those players who actually came to Villa in that season performed anywhere near well. Jordan Amavi was one who I've spoken about in the past, but then he got injured early on.
Yeah, very unfortunate.
Yeah, because then you couldn't sign him.
Oh, what
Jordan
a shame! I bet you were
Jordan
gutted,
Ibe.
weren't you?
Why would we want to replace Alberto Moreno? What's wrong with you?
Jordan Ibe, he was our top scorer, which isn't saying much, to be honest.
With like 1 goal, and that was an own goal.
I'll have you know that Alan Hutton actually scored 2 own goals that season.
Alan Hunt is quality, mate. Talk about Premier League proven
Alan
quality.
Alan Hutton was actually quality yesterday evening, which wink wink will be up
Yeah.
soon on the chat.
What do you wink? Neither of us actually care. It was a championship match between 2 average teams. Oh, gutted I missed that one. Curse you, Chris, and your quality matches.
At least I'm actually living near the club I support.
I live in St Andrews, Chris. The nearest football team is Dundee.
Aston Villa against Bristol City is going to be far better than Dundee against East Fife. So, I don't think you'll want to exactly talk in this situation.
Well, I will have you know that Exeter City are putting on a really good push for the playoffs.
That is
in the
actually
league,
incredible.
Sassy clicks everywhere.
Go on then.
Incredible what the City.
I feel like we've got off topic a little.
Yeah. So no, Tim Sherwood is really not too much to blame for what happened with Villa. I mean, we were already a team battling relegation, and bringing him in was, yes, a smart choice. Sacking him was not a smart choice, I'd agree, but it's not too questionable if you look at the situation Villa were in. Randy Lerner had to act, and he did. Unfortunately, that act was shocking, but what could he have done? Villa had everything at stake, losing their Premier League status. We did anyway, so it just shows that I don't think that anything different would have happened had Sherwood not been sacked.
Just to respond to that, I think much like with your choice, I think that Gary Monk was more questionable sacking. In terms of Aston Villa, I actually think that their problems stem from sacking Martin O'Neill. If you look at if you look at who they replaced him with, after like Alex McLeish, Gerard Houllier, and then was it Sherwood? Was it
Paul
Lambert? Paul Lambert, and then Sherwood, and then obviously Remy Gard. I think that their problems stemmed from the sacking of Martin O'Neill, just a great manager all round.
O'Neill and like the root of all of Villa's problems of late.
What was that? Sorry.
Martin O'Neill falling out with Randy.
Oh,
Lerner.
100%.
Randy Lerner is the root of all of Villa's bloody problems.
Well, yeah, because
I think he's terrible.
Yeah, he didn't want to spend money, while O'Neill did. Because
Aside from the fact that I low-key kind of wish that I had gone with Martin O'Neill instead of...
Please never use the phrase low-key ever again.
Why? He's my favourite Marvel supervillain. But anyway, I don't
understand that joke. I don't really want to, but
get out. Go outside. Anyway, what I would say about that is my issue firstly with Laudrup is that he did achieve a lot with Swansea, but I mean, the difference between Ranieri was very much. I think everyone would probably appreciate that Ranieri was probably a one-season wonder. And the difference between Ranieri and Laudrup was that, as Chris said, Laudrup had proven over a couple of seasons that within that side there was enough quality to be a mid-table Premier League side, and that was only backed up by the fact that they won a League Cup. So that's very successful. Don't get me wrong, but that showed that side had the quality to be able to do that. That side was a mid-table quality side, And what Laudrup did was he was underperforming with that side when he was sacked. By the time he was sacked, he had won one of his last 10 games. And if you're and if you're a side that's trying to get mid-table, possibly pushing for a Europa League spot, you cannot lose. You cannot win one of your 10 games of your last 10 games. Obviously, saying that as a Liverpool fan is a little bit hypocritical, but just we'll slide over that nicely. Go away. And the other thing about Tim Sherwood is I would say the situation makes it so different. With Swansea, Gary Monk was a replacement that they were genuinely confident could do things with the club, and he did. And like Josh said, it was very questionable sacking. When Villa sacked Tim Sherwood, there was nobody else who was going to take that job, who was going to be able to do anything that Tim Sherwood couldn't. Even if we ignore the fact that they did end up appointing Remy Gard, who was a completely ridiculous appointment. There were people who were better than Remy Gard. There was nobody who was going to be able to do things with that Villa side. And I think that in that situation, that's the reason for me why it makes that Tim Sherwood sacking so ridiculous, because I just don't think there would be anybody better to do that job. Even if he was struggling a little bit, I don't think there was anybody who was going to do it better. Like, if you had a choice between a person who might be able to just scrape you 17th in the Premier League, but if you sacked him because he was looking like he might not do so, and the result was probably a guaranteed relegation, it's just a ridiculous decision.
Everyone want to argue against Jose?
Not really.
Fine. 5-0 to Josh
really.
It is then.
Copyright trademark, Josh Samuels 2017.
This is one of those occasions where it actually suits me to have no argument against me because I've won 5 on the bounce now.
I suppose you could say that
Debatable,
the fact that Chelsea ended up reappointing Jose sort of says that they acknowledged that it was a mistake. But then it's almost quite similar in his second spell with Chelsea. It always seems to be the third season with Jose where things start to go a bit wrong. And in terms of the second season with Chelsea, that's definitely the case.
I think just to make a comparison...
The third season, I don't really know.
Well, Jose got sacked in his 4th season first time round.
But just to make a comparison between him and Laudrup. So what I said about Laudrup with Chris was that Laudrup proved that he had a mid-table quality side that he was, at that point, fighting for relegation for. When Jose was sacked, if I'm not wrong, he was 5th. 5th with a team that he had done amazing things with, don't get me wrong. But he was 5th with a team that should have been Premier League champions. And I think that that's something you have to take into account.
Well, should they have been, though? Especially with a team of... with Tevez.
Yes, they should.
Well, United had Tevez, Cristiano Ronaldo, Wayne Rooney at his peak, Rio Ferdinand, Edwin van der Sar, Ryan Giggs, Paul Scholes. I can go on. This was a class team. So, to say they should be Premier League champions is questionable. To say they should be challenging is a different story.
Okay, fine.
The gulf in pushing for Europa League qualification compared to just being a normal mid-table side is completely different from being a team that's pushing for a title compared to finishing.
No, I agree with that. But what I would say about... but I think you can still draw the parallel. I think that it was still a person managing a team that was clearly underperforming. And I think that... Fair enough, Josh, I'll take your point. The United side at that point was amazing. And arguably better than Chelsea. But Chelsea had an incredible side as well. They had some amazing players on the side. They had Lampard, arguably as peak. They had John Terry, who, I don't care what you say, you can argue with me if you want about Nemanja Vidic and Rio Ferdinand. The best centre-back in the league when he was at his best. And at that point he was. And if I'm not wrong, at that point they still had Petr Cech, who was absolutely brilliant as well. I think Chelsea's side was every bit as good as United's. And if they were sitting second, challenging with United, 10 points clear of every other team in the league, as they should have been, then fair play, harsh sacking. But they were 5th. They were behind 4 other teams, all of whom were far lower quality than Chelsea were. And I think that equally, aside from that, Jose fell out with Roman Abramovich. And when you fall out with Roman Abramovich,
you don't
that's pretty much
no.
it. And he obviously was probably losing the dressing room at that point as well. That was a team full of players that were champions. They were champion of the Premier League players that were sitting in 5th, trying to fight for their spot in 4th. And I think that what Jose has shown over the course of his career is that he's a brilliant manager, but when he loses the dressing room, he loses the dressing room completely. As we saw from when he lost the dressing room over the whole Eva Carnero thing in his second stint at Chelsea. And I think that what you need to realise is if I was an owner and Mourinho had lost the dressing room, I would sack him as well, because there's just no going back from there. He doesn't win it back. Jose is a sore loser. There is no doubt about that. And when he's lost the dressing room, he's too proud. He's too proud, and he can't gain it back. He can't find it within himself to go, okay, maybe I messed up on this thing, and I'll apologise for it. He can't take responsibility for that.
He'll blame
And
it.
I think that in many ways, I don't think he left Roman Abramovich any choice but to sack him in that situation.
To respond
Because of kind of
to respond to both of those points, I'll start with the latter point that you made. I wouldn't say that he lost the dressing room first time around. I just wouldn't. I don't think there was any indication. If you could give an example, I don't think there was any indication to suggest that he had lost the dressing room. I think it was just a case of a poor decision by Abramovich. But secondly, you said they were fifth. This was only sort of October, November. This is the sort of time when teams like Bolton were in fourth place. So obviously that seriously, come the end of the season, that obviously wasn't going to be the case. It's not like it was April time and they were still in fifth.
We were saying this about Leicester though last season.
Were we?
We were. I mean, when you look at
Leicester were in fourth, they shouldn't be.
We were saying, they're not going to be that at that point at the end of the season. We were wrong.
Right, but that was Leicester, who had never had any Premier League triumph in their entire history, whereas Chelsea had won the league twice in 2 years, starting only 3 years previously. So I think that's a slightly odd comparison. But
I was comparing Leicester to Bolton.
Oh right, okay. Yeah, well,
Anyway,
that proves my point though. That underlines my point that Bolton weren't going to be there. They did it every season under Allardyce. They weren't going to be there come the end of the season. So why, as a point to say that they were in fifth behind, I don't know who was. I think like Bolton and Portsmouth often come around that time of the season in those top sort of 4 or 5 places.
I don't know. I could try and find.
So to say that because they were fifth at that point in the season, warranted Mourinho sacking, I think, is a bit of a joke, to be honest.
I feel like we should probably bring this to an end because we've we're close to surpassing the hour mark at this rate.
Oh no! What have we done?
What have
Chris, learn to control your pundits.
What makes me think I would want you two as my personal pundits?
Because we're very knowledgeable.
Yeah.
If you say so, mate. You're not knowledgeable enough to support a team that's not Liverpool.
That was sick burn, bro.
Yeah.
You've got me there.
Who would I rather support? Who would I rather support? A team in
17 wins as Liverpool.
A team in fifth that hasn't won the league in like 26 years, or a team that's in the Championship that hasn't won the league in about 35 years. Oh.
I don't choose who I support.
You could just keep the bragging rights because United are the most successful club in England.
Hey.
So on that happy.
If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. Oh, sorry guys, you're not happy. What a shame. Awkward.
I'm happy because Villa won yesterday. But
I'm happy because we didn't talk about Liverpool Leicester and we have to end the podcast before you guys can get onto it.
Lavering, it's always next week when Liverpool lose again.
Right. So.
Yeah,
So who do you guys think was the most questionable managerial sacking? Was it Laudrup? Was it Sherwood? Was it Mourinho in his first spell? Or was it someone else? Let us know in the comments below. Drop a like and subscribe. We'll see you next time when no doubt we will be talking about how terrible Liverpool are.
Fingers crossed.
See you then.
Ya. Right, good episode, guys. The 4th time running.
Right, let's save this bad boy.
For more footballing news and views, like, follow, share and subscribe.